Not in your typical Beverly Hills area.
It's North Hollywood, right?
Yeah, North Hollywood. It's perfect for me. I don't need something huge.
No.
Hollywood didn't discover Verne Troyer and hand him a spotlight. At first, they treated him like a special effect you could zip up and hide. A body you could squeeze into a suit, a punchline you could move around on command. And for years, it worked, because audiences never knew his name. They just saw the gorilla, the alien, the baby. Then Austin Powers hit, and suddenly the world could finally see him, but in the most complicated way possible. Because when people finally recognized Verne, they didn't recognize Verne. They recognized Mini-Me. And that one nickname followed him everywhere, into airports, onto reality TV, and into the worst moment of his private life when something deeply personal got pushed into the public without his consent. And by the time the official reports came out about how his life ended, the story looked a lot darker than the jokes ever showed. Before the movie sets, before the tabloid headlines, Verne's world was small and quiet. Michigan roads, farm chores, and a community where everybody knew everybody. He wasn't born into fame. He was born into routine, work, expectations. And even with a rare form of dwarfism, he still grew up in a world that didn't hand out special treatment. If anything, it demanded you keep up. That early life mattered because it shaped the version of Verne most people never got to meet. Stubborn, practical, and used to pushing through discomfort without complaining. And that's the part that makes what happens later feel even more brutal, because when Hollywood finally came calling, they didn't reward that grit with respect. They rewarded it with roles where he could disappear. And once you become the guy who can disappear, it's hard to convince anyone you deserve the camera. But that was exactly the fight he walked into. At some point, Verne realized something most people never admit out loud. If he stayed where he was, the world would never change around him. So he left. He went chasing opportunity the way people do when they're half confident and half terrified. No safety net, no famous last name, no guarantee anyone would take him seriously. And the scary part is, at first, they didn't. He wasn't getting auditions to play the hero or the love interest or the guy with a big emotional speech. The offers were stranger than that, smaller than that. The kind of work where your face doesn't matter, only your height and your endurance. And it sounds simple until you picture it. Being asked to do exhausting physical work for a film, while the audience doesn't even know you exist. That's how his career started, not with applause, but with invisibility. And once you accept invisible work, Hollywood keeps ordering more. Here's the part most people skip. Verne didn't enter Hollywood as a celebrity. He entered it as a tool. Productions didn't look at him and think, "That's an actor." They thought, "That's a solution." Need a character that can fit into a tight space? Need someone to do stunts that would be unsafe for a child performer? Need a body that can sell an illusion? Call Verne. And the more reliable he was, the more the industry leaned on him. That's the trap. Because when you're too good at the hidden jobs, you become permanently linked to them. People praise the scene, but not the performer. People remember the gag, but not the guy under the costume. And for Verne, this wasn't a one-time thing. It became a pattern, one role after another where he did the hard part, then vanished when the credits rolled. But that pattern was about to build him up, just to break him later. One of his earliest big breaks was exactly the kind of role that tells you everything about how Hollywood saw him. Stunt work where the character on screen wasn't even supposed to be him. Imagine doing dangerous physical scenes, in awkward costumes, repeating takes until your body aches, while the audience thinks it's just movie magic. That was Verne's reality. It wasn't glamorous. It was survival. And what's wild is how this kind of work trains you to accept being erased. Because if you speak up, someone else takes the job. If you complain, you're difficult. So you grind, you smile, you cash the check, and you hope the next call will finally be the one where the camera stays on your face. For Verne, that hope kept him moving through suit roles, creature roles, and one more hidden job after another. And then came the moment where he finally walked into a room and made people pay attention. By the mid-90s, Verne was building a reputation in Hollywood, but not the kind most actors dream of. He was becoming known as the guy who could handle physically brutal roles, the ones where you're inside layers of foam, prosthetics, heavy suits, awkward rigs, sweating under lights while trying to hit marks like a machine. He wasn't just acting, he was enduring. And every time he delivered, it reinforced the same message. We don't need your face, we need your body. That's a cold way to build a career, because it slowly messes with how you see yourself. If your job is always to play something non-human, something silent, something masked, you start to feel like the world only values you when you're not fully you. Verne kept pushing anyway, stacking credits, chasing bigger chances. And one of those chances came in a massive sci-fi movie where millions saw the character without realizing who brought it to life. Men in Black was huge. One of those films that stamped itself into pop culture. And buried inside it, Verne appears as the alien son, part of the weird, unforgettable world the movie created. That sounds like a win, until you remember the pattern. The audience remembers the creature, the gag, the moment, but they don't remember the performer. And that kind of recognition is dangerous, because it's addictive in the worst way. You feel close to success, close to being seen, but you're still behind glass. Verne's career was starting to look like that over and over again. Famous movies, small roles, hidden face, limited respect. And it's not that he wasn't talented. It's that Hollywood didn't know what to do with him outside of the novelty box. But then 1999 rolled around, and suddenly the industry put him in front of the camera in a way that changed his life overnight. The twist is that change didn't free him. It trapped him. The saddest part about typecasting is that it doesn't feel like oppression when it's paying your bills. It feels like opportunity. And for Verne, every role was proof he could survive in an industry that rarely made space for people like him. But that survival came with a price. His identity got flattened into a single idea. Small body equals joke, creature, sidekick, prop. Even when he got a rare moment to appear as a normal person on screen, it didn't reset the system. Hollywood kept pulling him back into the same lane, and the public learned the same lesson. They didn't treat him like a full actor. They treated him like a character they owned. That's why what happened next was so important, because it didn't just give him a job. It gave him a name the world would never forget. The problem is, it wasn't the name he wanted. And once the world chose a label for you, it doesn't let go. When Verne walked into the Austin Powers audition, he wasn't walking in as a celebrity. He was walking in as a guy who'd spent years being used as a hidden solution. But something about him hit different. His timing, his expressions, the way he could turn silence into comedy. The character Mini-Me wasn't supposed to become iconic like that. It was supposed to be quick, disposable. Just another gag. But the audition changed the energy in the room, and suddenly the role expanded. And when the movie came out, it wasn't just a success. It turned Verne into a global image. That's the moment people think the story becomes happy. Like, finally, he made it. But here's what fame does when it arrives too fast. It doesn't ask what you're ready for. It doesn't protect you. It just puts a spotlight on everything. Your body, your privacy, your mistakes, and hands the world permission to comment. Verne got recognition, and then he lost control of how people saw him. After Austin Powers, Verne couldn't walk into a restaurant like a normal person anymore. People didn't just recognize him. They approached him like he was public property. Like the character had escaped the screen, and they were allowed to grab it. And that's where the tone of his fame turned strange. Because it wasn't admiration in the usual sense. It was obsession mixed with disrespect. Strangers shouting, "Mini-Me," laughing before he even spoke, treating him like a toy they could pose with. Fame like that doesn't feel warm. It feels like being surrounded. And the industry didn't exactly help. Instead of giving him more complex roles that showed range, Hollywood kept circling back to the same gimmick. Short guy equals comedy. Short guy equals spectacle. That pressure doesn't hit all at once. It builds quietly, day by day, until you start needing something to numb it. And when the cameras eventually followed him into reality TV chaos, it wasn't random. It was the same story. People didn't want Verne. They wanted a moment. And what came next was the moment the world still argues about. Mini-Me made Verne famous, but it also taught the world the wrong lesson, that he was something you could point at, laugh at, and move on from. And that's the scary part, because when a character becomes a meme, the real person starts getting treated like an object. People weren't just fans anymore, they were bold, touching him without asking, shouting the nickname like it was his legal name, acting like the joke belonged to them. And when that happens long enough, it messes with your head, because you stop being a guy who acts, and you become a thing that exists for reactions. If you're still watching, tap like and subscribe, because the next part is where the industry quietly pushed him right back into the shadows. And quick question, if the whole world called you by one nickname you didn't choose, do you think you'd start to lose who you really are? The public thought fame meant freedom. For Verne, it meant the opposite, because now, even when he wasn't on a set, he was still performing, smiling through strangers invading his space, laughing off comments that weren't funny, pretending he didn't notice the way people looked at him like a novelty. And Hollywood didn't rush to give him deeper roles to match his new visibility. Instead, it kept feeding the same machine. Put him in something weird, make the audience react, move on. That's how you end up famous but still not respected. Known but not understood. And the pressure builds because you can't escape the label. You can't take a day off from being recognized. Every random interaction becomes a reminder that the world is locked onto one version of you. And that's when you start realizing the success story isn't as clean as it looks from the outside, because behind the jokes, he was still being erased, just in a more public way. After the Austin Powers explosion, you'd expect the next step to be roles that let Verne show range, something emotional, something real. But the industry has a habit. It rewards what it can easily sell. And what it could sell was Mini-Me. So even when he got work in huge productions, the pattern didn't disappear. He'd be buried under makeup, pushed into a fantasy corner, or used in a way where the character mattered more than the performer. It's a subtle kind of disrespect because it comes wrapped as opportunity. Look, you're in a blockbuster. But if you're hidden again, it doesn't move your career forward, it just repeats the same message. You're valuable as a concept, not as a person. And for Verne, that repetition wasn't just career frustration. It seeped into how people treated him in everyday life, because audiences follow what films teach them. When films treat you like a prop, the world starts doing it too. And one of the biggest examples of this came when he stepped into a famous wizarding world and still couldn't truly be seen. Verne appeared in the Harry Potter world as Griffook. Sounds like a massive win, right? But the reality was brutal in a quieter way. Heavy prosthetics, hours in the chair, layers that turned his face into someone else's creation. The franchise was huge, the spotlight was massive, and yet he was once again transformed into something non-human for the audience to consume. It's like Hollywood only knew two modes for him: invisible stunt worker or heavily altered creature. Either way, the real Verne stayed trapped behind a mask. And when you live like that long enough, you start to feel replaceable, because if the face is prosthetic and the body is just the right size, the industry can swap you out and keep going. That's what makes this period feel so heavy in hindsight. The outside world saw a celebrity riding a wave. But behind the scenes, he was still fighting to be treated like a full actor with a full identity. And when that fight gets exhausting, people look for escapes, and sometimes the worst escape is the one the public doesn't notice until it's too late. By this point, Verne had something most actors chase forever: global recognition. But it came with a humiliating side effect. People felt entitled to him, not to his work, to him. And that entitlement gets darker the longer it goes on, because it turns normal life into a constant ambush. A meal becomes an interruption. A walk becomes a photo op. A quiet night becomes someone else's story to tell. The more famous he got, the less control he seemed to have over his own image. And that's the part most success stories don't include: how fame can shrink your world instead of expanding it. Because once the public decides what you are, They defend that version like it's theirs, and when you try to show them something deeper, they get bored. They want the same joke, the same character, the same character, the same reaction. That's why what happened next on reality TV wasn't some random detour. It was the industry doing what it always does, turning his most vulnerable moments into entertainment. And once that door opened, it didn't close cleanly. By 2005, Verne wasn't just a movie star anymore. He was a target for moments. The kind of moments reality TV loves, because it doesn't need context, it just needs footage. He signed on for the surreal life, and on paper it looked harmless. A chaotic celebrity house, jokes, drama, easy checks. But the problem with that format is simple. When someone starts slipping, the cameras don't stop. They zoom in, and Verne was already carrying years of pressure from being reduced to a character in public. In that house, he wasn't protected as a person. He was treated like a storyline. And once a show decides you're the storyline, it doesn't matter what's actually going on in your head. All that matters is whether the audience reacts. And Verne gave them reactions, some funny, some uncomfortable, and some that should have been a warning sign to everyone watching. But the warning didn't land. It became entertainment. The most disturbing part isn't even what happened on The Surreal Life. It's that it got aired like it was normal. When Verne had an intoxicated meltdown and ended up exposed and humiliated on camera, it wasn't treated like a human being falling apart. It was treated like good TV. People laughed, clips spread, and the conversation became about how wild it was, never about how dark it looked. That's how reality TV can quietly destroy someone. It turns a low point into a brand. And once that brand sticks, it follows you forever. Suddenly, a vulnerable moment becomes the first thing strangers bring up to your face. You're not allowed to outgrow it. You're not allowed to be complicated. You're just the guy from the clip. And for Verne, that added another layer to the cage he was already stuck in. First, it was mini-me. Now it was that reality show moment. And the world didn't realize it was watching someone spiral. It thought it was watching a joke. Then it happened again on Celebrity Big Brother. Different show, same outcome. Verne's struggle turned into a viral punchline. Cameras caught him impaired, unsteady, crashing, needing help. Exactly the kind of footage that spreads fast because it makes people feel allowed to laugh. And if you're Verne, imagine what that does to you afterward. You wake up, check the internet, and realize your worst night is now a headline, a meme, a clip people replay for fun. That kind of public humiliation doesn't just sting once. It rewires how you move through the world. It makes you paranoid, defensive, isolated. Because now the fear isn't just, will people recognize me? The fear becomes, what are they hoping to catch me doing? And that's where the spotlight turns toxic. Fame stops being attention and becomes surveillance. And when someone feels watched like that, they either disappear or they self-destruct in public again. Around all of this, the media couldn't resist making him smaller than he already was. Not physically, socially. Headlines leaned into cheap jokes, gross comments, and shock value. Like that was the only way to talk about him. The industry built a character, reality TV built a meme, and tabloids built a spectacle. And the worst part is how fast that spectacle spreads. One article becomes 10. One clip becomes 1,000 reposts. People who never met him start talking like they know him, like he exists only as content. Meanwhile, the real Verne is still sitting there with the same private life, the same emotions, the same loneliness, and now he's carrying extra shame he never asked for. When someone's identity gets turned into a public toy, it invites the worst kind of violation. Because eventually, somebody decides privacy doesn't apply. And for Verne, that next violation didn't come as a rumor. It came as something real, something personal, and something that hit the internet before he could stop it. In 2008, something extremely private leaked out into public circulation without his consent. And the reason that matters is simple. This wasn't a celebrity oops, it wasn't a planned stunt. It was a breach. But once the media machine smells a story like that, It doesn't care about consent, it cares about clicks. The coverage exploded. People mocked. People shared. People treated it like entertainment, like it was just another weird chapter in the mini-me circus. And if you've ever wondered how someone can look fine in photos while falling apart inside, this is the kind of moment that explains it. Because it's not just embarrassment, it's the feeling that you don't own your body, your image, or your life anymore. Verne had already spent years being used on screen. Now he was being used off-screen too. And this time, he didn't just try to laugh it off. He decided to fight back in the only way he could. Verne went legal. He filed a massive lawsuit, aiming at the people and companies he believed were profiting off what should have never been public in the first place. And that move alone tells you how serious it was, because lawsuits like that aren't fun. They're exhausting, expensive, and they force you to relive the humiliation in slow motion. Every filing becomes a new headline. Every hearing becomes fresh jokes. So even while he was trying to protect himself, the story kept getting louder. That's the trap. The more you fight, the more attention it gets. But he still pushed because he wanted control back. He wanted the world to stop treating his private life like a product. He wanted to be seen as a victim of a violation, not as a punchline. And for a moment, it looked like he might get some of that control. But control doesn't fix the deeper damage, because by then the stress wasn't coming from one event. It was coming from years of being reduced, mocked, and cornered. What people miss is how these moments stack. One humiliating clip can haunt you. A leaked private situation can break your trust. Constant public disrespect can wear down your sense of self. And when those things pile up, they don't just disappear because a project ends or a lawsuit settles. They follow you into quiet rooms. They follow you into relationships. They follow you when you're alone at night, and the crowd noise finally stops. Verne had fame, money, and recognition, but the recognition came attached to an identity the world forced onto him. And that kind of fame can make you feel more alone than being unknown, because everyone thinks they know you, but almost nobody actually does. This is where the story gets harder, because the later years weren't just he partied too hard or he struggled sometimes. The reports paint a picture of someone trying to get help, slipping, trying again, and carrying a heaviness that the public mostly ignored, until it became impossible to ignore. In his final years, the pattern looked painfully familiar. Periods where he tried to steady himself, then periods where things clearly weren't okay. Friends worried. Reports described hospital visits and treatment attempts. And what makes it more heartbreaking is that he wasn't hiding it perfectly. At times, he spoke directly to fans in a way that sounded like someone genuinely trying to hold on. Someone telling people he was taking it day by day. That kind of message doesn't come from a person who thinks everything is fine. It comes from someone fighting in real time, and the world has a nasty habit of applauding that fight for a second, then moving on to the next trending topic. But Verne's life wasn't a trend. It was a long battle that didn't end when the cameras left. And in April 2018, that battle reached a breaking point that triggered an emergency response, one that made it clear how serious things had become behind closed doors. Early April 2018 is where the story turns into a crisis. Reports say authorities were called because people around him believed he was in danger and deeply distressed, and he ended up placed on an emergency psychiatric evaluation hold. Coverage also described extremely high alcohol levels at the time. That's not gossip. That's not celebrity drama. That's an alarm bell. Because when someone is in that state, it means the pain isn't theoretical anymore. It's active. It's immediate. And even then, most people still didn't view it with seriousness. They viewed it like another headline. Another sad update. But that situation didn't just blow over. Days turned into weeks, and the outcome became irreversible. And later, when official information came out about what happened, it confirmed what many fans suspected but didn't want to accept. The ending wasn't sudden or random. It was the last chapter of a struggle that had been visible for years, if people were willing to look past the jokes. After Verne passed in April 2018, the official ruling later listed the manner of death as self-harm, tied to the effects of alcohol intoxication. That single line hits differently when you replay his whole life. The early years of being hidden in costumes. The moment fame finally arrived only to trap him in a nickname. The public treating him like a toy. Reality TV turning low moments into entertainment. The media feeding off humiliation. And then the ultimate violation, his privacy becoming content for strangers. It's not one thing that breaks someone. It's the weight of everything. Verne's story is uncomfortable because it forces a question people don't like asking. How much of a celebrity's downfall is personal failure, and how much is the world pushing them toward the edge while calling it entertainment? Because if you strip away the memes and the punchlines, what's left is a human being who fought for years to be seen as more than a character, and never fully got that chance.